Hello and welcome to the Flipping and Wholesaling Houses in New York show. I am Michael Pinter. I teach you how to start flipping or wholesaling houses in New York, or if you're already doing how to grow your business. I had a question recently. This came from a comment. We're going to talk later about how much I want your comment. So comment was about transactional funding. Okay, so let's talk about what transactional funding is. Is it something you want to use in New York? How does it work? Okay. Transactional funding is a lending facility where a lender lends you money if you are in contract to buy something and in contract to sell something. But you have to close on it, but you need the money to close for a very short term. And they usually charge between 1% and 2% of what they lend. They are sometimes going to lend you 100%. Sometimes they want you to put up some cash. And it comes in a situation where you have a double close and you need to use the funds. Now, ironically, I once actually did use transactional funding. It's not cheap, and you really have to be in a situation that warrants you needing to close. So in most situations that I'm in, I can assign the contract. And that means I don't need to close. So I don't need transactional funding. I might need money for the deposit, but that's about it. Now, the situation I was in that one time was where I was in contract to buy 7 properties from one buyer, from one seller. And I had a buyer for 5 of them. And I wanted to close on the 5, but I didn't want the seller to really know about the other 2. I didn't want the seller to know I was assigning those contracts. So I closed on it. It was a lot. I think it was $750,000 was my cost, but I assigned it to a buyer for $975,000. So that was good. It was like a $225,000 spread. But my transactional funding costs and my double closing costs and all my title costs cost me about 40 grand, about $8,000 per property. So I ended up making $180,000, which was I think my best deal ever. So that's good. So occasionally you need it, but it really depends on the situation. I would highly recommend against double closing on deals if you don't have to. Now remember, the whole thinking of the double close, let's talk about it. It's much more prevalent in other states because in other states, it's very easy to get into contract, right? A contract takes place between a buyer and a seller. I find a seller, he wants to sell, I give him a contract, and we're in contract. But it's also very easy to get out of contract. So if the seller changes his mind, there's not that much you can do. Now in certain states, I know you can record the contract. You can record a memorandum of contract. You can record something about the contract. But that doesn't prevent the guy from not selling to you. All it really does is allow you to sort of cloud title, where if the guy tries to sell it to somebody else, you can then say, hey, I'm not doing it unless you give me the money I was going to make. That could happen. But he may not sell the house for 100 years. In New York, we are incredibly fortunate in that contract law here, now remember, contracts here don't take place between a buyer and a seller. They take place between a seller's attorney who generates the contract and the buyer's attorney, usually me, until I find somebody else. But the contract does not allow a seller to change his mind. It just doesn't happen. So if a seller changes their mind, and it happened once in a while, somebody said to me, I want more money. Two things can take place, right? And I've never gone through this, but 2 things can take place. The first thing that can happen is I can sue the seller for specific performance, which means the entire purchase price. So even if I was going to make $10,000 on the deal or $30,000 on the deal, but I was buying it for $500,000, I could sue the seller for the entire $500,000. If I'm a buyer in contract, I want to perform, I want to buy, but he doesn't want to sell. The second thing I can do is I can put a list pendants on the property, which is exactly the same as if a bank is foreclosing on the property. So that prevents him from selling it to anybody else. And it is a lawsuit that I will definitely win to give me all the money that I wanted. So you may say, well, sellers don't know that, but sellers are represented by an attorney, and any attorney will tell them that, right? So I've told the story 100 times, I want to tell it again. One of my first wholesale deals was a big deal. It was like over $100,000 deal, and the seller was a very militant guy. He was just angry. Everybody was screwing him over, and I got nervous. And I said to my attorney, maybe I should double close on this, because if this guy sees that I'm going to make $110,000 on this deal, he's going to flip out. And my attorney told me very wise words that have served me well since then. And that is, he may be pissed off, but he's selling you the house. He can't sell it to anybody else, can't change his mind. And that is exactly what happened. I didn't go to the closing. I don't go to closings. But I don't know if he was upset or not. And I don't really care because it's impossible to get out of contract in New York. So therefore, this whole basis for transactional funding, and I know this happens in other parts of the country, and maybe it's customary in other parts of the country, where if you're making a lot of money, you maybe don't want the seller to see it, you maybe don't want the buyer to see what your original price was, so you double close, and you maybe need a transactional funder. In New York, I would advise against it, and I would advise using an attorney who understands how an assignment of contract works. Now, I warn you that 99.9% of the attorneys who even specialize in real estate do not know how an assignment of contract works. And you might hear something from them it sounds like, well, I don't want to do an assignment. It's complicated. You're taking the place of the seller. The buyer taking your place, and you may get stuck and all that crap. That just means he's never done an assignment before. You need to use an attorney who actually has done assignments before. And there are a bunch, right? And depending where you are, if you need help, just send me an email or shoot a comment, tell me where you are, and I can recommend an attorney who can help you, who knows what they're doing. But an assignment of contract is the way to go, as opposed to double closing in New York. Because in New York also, most title companies are going to charge you not just transfer tax on the second close, which is $4 per thousand. Usually isn't that much, even if it's a $500,000 deal, you're talking about $2,000. But they're going to charge you recording fees to record the deed, and they're going to charge you a lot of other title charges on it, and it can add up. It can be thousands and thousands of dollars besides the money you're going to pay to transactional funder. Now, having said that, there are situations where it's necessary, right? Where it may have to happen, right? The situation I told you, where I had other properties with the seller. I didn't want them to know about it. I was still making a ton of money on that, the most money I've ever made on one deal. So then you might want to call transactional funders. Now, some transactional funders may not want to operate in New York because this is so rare in New York that something like this would happen. But if you find somebody, I'd say they charge 1% to 2%. Sometimes they'll give you everything. Sometimes they'll give you some. They want to see the way it works in all other states is that the transaction is really run by a title company. So you call a transactional funding company in Tennessee, and they're going to say, well, who's the title company? I want to know who they are. And then they're going to find out that the title company doesn't even touch the money. The transactions in New York happen through an attorney. An attorney is the one who disperses the funds. It's really an attorney. And the hierarchy of attorneys is that the seller's attorney is going to prepare the contract. Buyer's attorney is going to, in the contract phase, buyer's attorney is going to get the contract, negotiate the contract, go back to the seller, buyer signs, then the seller signs, then you're in contract. And at the closing, basically, if there's a lender, so there are plenty of closings where I have 4 attorneys there, right? So I have a seller's attorney, I have my attorney, I have a buyer's attorney, and if the buyer's getting hard money, then there's a lender's attorney. A lender's attorney usually runs the show, so it'll take place, if there's no lender, closing will usually take place in the seller's office. If there's a lender, it almost always takes place in a lender's office. The lender pretty much runs the show because that's where most of the money's coming from. The seller's going to discuss how the funds are dispersed, but the lender is going to be the one who's dispersing the funds, at least most of them. So everything will go to one attorney. Again, all these things have to be run depending on the situation and how it works, how much extra proceeds there are. It might be a payout for where most of the money's going to an open lien on it or a mortgage on it. So that's how it works. So a transactional funder working in New York, that's unfamiliar with New York, may not understand that and may say, well, I want to talk to the title company that's going to be running this deal, and the title company is not going to be running the deal because title companies do not run deals in New York. All they they're just service providers. Their job really is to do 2 things: to make sure all the taxes are paid and to make sure all the liens are paid off. That's it. Another reason why Subject 2 really does not work in New York, because the title companies here, they're, like I said, they only have 2 jobs: make sure the taxes are paid, make sure the liens are paid. So if you come to them and say, hey, we don't want to pay off the lien because we're taking it Subject 2, I would say 99.9, if not 100% of the title companies in New York are going to say, I'm sorry, we can't let that happen. There's a due on sale clause. Again, that is something that happens in other states. I know it happens in other states. Title companies there are okay with closing subject to the first mortgage. By the way, what does Subject 2 even mean? Subject 2 means I'm buying a property, there's a mortgage on it. Seller will sell me the property, but I'm buying it subject to that mortgage, so the mortgage stays in place. It's very hard to make that work in New York. I'm not going to say impossible, but it's pretty much impossible. So I hope this was helpful about what transactional funding is and why you may or may not want it. I've only used it on that one deal, only one time, and it's specifically because the deal called for it. If it doesn't call for it, I would definitely lean towards assigning the contract, just go in that direction. And that's it. I hope this was helpful. If you're interested in other ways that can help you, go to howtoflipnewyork.com. If you're interested in my course that teaches how to do this, go to howtoflipnewyorkcourse.com. If you're interested in coaching, go to coaching.howtoflipnewyork.com. If you are watching on YouTube, please subscribe. If you are watching on any platform, please click like. The thumbs up really helps my SEO, my search engine optimization, allows other people to see this. I go live 5 times a week. I run out of ideas. This was a comment that just came. I thought it was a good question. So please keep the comments coming. Again, I run out of topics, and I know you may not have watched any other videos, maybe the first video you're watching. But to me, if I've spoken about something a month or two ago, I feel like I just spoke about it. It's a stupid thing in my head. I apologize. But keep the comments coming. And if it's something simple, I'll just reply with an answer. If it's a topic that I covered recently or in depth, I'll send you links to a video or videos on it. And if it's something I haven't covered in a while, or it's something that I've never covered, I don't think I ever covered transactional funding before, so that's great. Then I'll do a video on it. So thank you very, very much for watching. Please keep the comments coming. Thank you.